Knee damage, a mountain of surgeries, bladder cancer. It's hard to imagine that someone like the legendary Bob Lanier, who dominated at his peak for over a decade, would face such a tragic end, but he did. His story is one that'll tug at your heartstrings and leave you reflecting on the tough battles he fought off the court. Growing up, Robert Jerry Lanier was a lad with an insane drive to become an NBA warrior, but his journey was filled with rejection for weird reasons. First, they said his size 11 feet, at just 11 years old, were too big for him to succeed. Then they claimed he was too clumsy. This one cost him an entry to the varsity basketball team as a sophomore. Just hearing all these excuses and criticisms would be enough to make anyone consider switching careers to professional couch potato. But just like every hero in the making, there had to be a moment of doubt followed by a spark of determination. For Bob, that push came in the person of his new coach, Fred Schwepker, who was also his biology teacher. Interestingly, this man saw something in Bob that no one else did. Fred told him to keep pushing and believe in himself. And boy, did Bob take that advice to heart. This time, when he went for the team, he made it. And from that moment on, he was unstoppable. Imagine being so good that over 100 universities are fighting over you. Bob had options, lots of them, but he chose St. Bonaventure, and from the moment he stepped on the court, he was a monster. For 3 straight years, he was the guy, leading the team and turning every game into a personal showcase. In his final season, he was practically unstoppable, leading the Bonnies to one of their best runs ever. They tore through opponents, stacking win after win until they secured a spot in the 1970 NCAA tournament. It felt like nothing could stand in their way, but then disaster. In a game against Villanova, Bob collided with Chris Ford, and just like that, everything changed. His knee shattered, and with it, the team's dreams took a brutal hit. For the first time, Bob wasn't just battling defenders, he was battling fate itself. It would be safe to say this was the beginning of a lifelong battle with his body. Bob had not 1, not 2, but over 8 knee surgeries. Yeah, you heard that right, 8. At this point, his knees probably had more stitch work than a designer handbag. Honestly, you'd think after surgery number 4, Bob would have given his knees a pep talk like, "All right, guys, can we hold it together just for one season? I'm trying to make history here." Well, St. Bonaventure went on to face Jacksonville in the Final Four, but without their star player Bob, it was like showing up to a sword fight with a toothpick. The magic that left the building along with Bob's busted knee. They gave it their best shot but fell short. They lost. Let's be real though, without Bob, the dream of a championship was doomed before the game even started. But what if? What if Bob Lanier had stayed healthy? What if he had taken the court in the Final Four? Anyway, Bob Lanier landed in the NBA as the big man everyone was talking about. Literally, his shoe size was a flipping 22. Think about that for a second. That's not a shoe, that's a small boat. But instead of smooth sailing, his rookie year with the Detroit Pistons started like a bad soap opera. Fresh off knee surgery from his college days, Bob Lanier wasn't exactly NBA ready, but the Pistons still shoved him on the court. And of course, he did say something along the lines of, "My knee was so sore every single day, it was ludicrous to be doing what I was doing." Honestly, playing on a bad knee sounds more like self-torture. Even with one shaky leg, Bob somehow still made the all-rookie team. Fast forward a bit, and Lanier became the backbone of the Pistons. Teamed up with Dave Bing, he was pulling off monster numbers like a walking cheat code. 21 points per game here, 25 points per game there. And there was this big moment in 1972 when he dropped 48 points in one game. That's like the Pistons' version of a family heirloom at this point. For a man like Bob Lanier, you'd think he'd have an untouchable reputation, right? Yeah, dominating the court for 14 years and putting up numbers that most players could only dream of isn't exactly average guy behavior. But even giants of the game can have a few, let's call them interesting moments. Let's start with the bad news. Lanier never made it to an NBA Finals game. Ouch, right? Despite all his greatness, he didn't smell the shiny championship ring. But what he did collect was a reputation as one of the toughest, most physical players to ever grace the hardwood. Willis Reed even called him one of the best all-around big men in NBA history. So yeah, Bob was respected, but he also had a bit of a reputation for throwing hands. Now let's get to that incident, the 1977 NBA playoffs. Pistons versus Golden State Warriors. It all started when Charles Dudley of the Warriors and Eric Money of the Pistons got into it on the court. A little pushing here, a little jawing there, and then fists were flying. Standard basketball drama. But it didn't stop there. A Warriors fan decided it was his time to shine and punched ML Carr, because apparently beer-fueled courage doesn't come with a warning label. And just when you think, wow, it couldn't get crazier, Bob Lanier steps in. Not to break things up, by the way. Big Bob decked the fan. As in, Put him on the floor, you're gonna need an ice pack decked. The refs, in what can only be described as peak 1970s NBA logic, called personal fouls on Dudley and Money. No one was ejected, no technical fouls were handed out, and the game just kept going. Golden State went on to win, but honestly, no one remembers the score because Bob Lanier turned the game into an action movie. Now, decking a fan isn't exactly something you'd brag about at family reunions, but it does speak volumes about the era. Lanier, with his massive 22-inch sneakers and a reputation as the league's enforcer, wasn't the type to back down, whether it was from opposing players or even fans. But all that aside, Detroit as a team was a tough place for Lanier. Imagine trying to build something solid when the foundation keeps shifting. That's what it felt like with Detroit's constant changes. 8 different coaches in 10 years. It was chaos. Lanier later admitted that the constant turnover was frustrating, and it's hard to blame him. How do you focus on winning when the leadership is always changing? And then there were still the injuries. By the end of his time with the Pistons, Lanier's knees had taken a serious toll. Despite that, he still remained one of the team's top performers, carrying much of the load on the court. Even as his body struggled, his skill and determination kept him going. In 1980, Lanier finally decided he'd had enough of Detroit's chaos. He asked for a trade, and it was, "Welcome to the Milwaukee Bucks." Now, if Detroit was a dysfunctional family reunion, Milwaukee was more like a warm hug. The crowd gave him a standing ovation when he arrived, and for the first time in years, Lanier felt at home. Sure, his knees were still giving him grief, but the Bucks didn't need him to play 40 minutes a night. They just needed his experience. And of course, he delivered. He played alongside talents like Marcus Johnson and Sidney Moncrief, helping the Bucks win 5 straight division titles. At this point, Lanier was like the wise uncle, full of stories and still getting the job done whenever the team needed him. But still, everything wasn't perfect. Lanier's knees were basically calling him every day to remind him, "Hey, we're done here." By 1984, Bob Lanier finally retired, saying goodbye to basketball with a mix of relief and regret. After hanging up his size 22 sneakers, Lanier didn't just fade into the background. He took on the role of NBA Global Ambassador, sharing his love for the game and mentoring young players. His passion for basketball never moved a bit, and he remained a beloved figure in the NBA community. Sadly, on May 10th, 2022, the basketball world lost a true legend. Bob Lanier, at the age of 73, passed away after a brief illness. His health had been a concern for some time, as The Athletic reported in 2019 that he had been undergoing treatment for bladder cancer. Though he is no longer here, his legacy as a dominant player and a tireless ambassador for basketball will continue to resonate for generations to come. And if you think about it, his legacy isn't just about the game. He has a court named after him at St. Bonaventure, Bob Lanier Court. His number 31 is retired by both the Detroit Pistons and the Milwaukee Bucks, and he's even enshrined in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Let's not forget the J. Walter Kennedy Citizenship Award, the YMCA Jackie Robinson Award, and the Congressional Horizon and Leadership Award he bagged over the years. Oh, and when Bob passed in 2022, the Detroit Pistons honored him by wearing a black stripe with his number, 16 on their jerseys. Yeah, Bob left a massive mark. And that, guys, ends the bittersweet story of Bob Lanier, a man who dominated the game, carried teams through years of turmoil, and somehow remained unshaken through it all. What's the most unforgettable Bob Lanier moment for you, on or off the court? Let us know in the comments section. And hey, if you loved hearing about this NBA legend, hit that like button and don't forget to also hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.